Hello everyone, welcome to the 9th episode of the Superintendent's Corner. Not sure where you all are when we'll be watching this, but we're in the middle of the summer here in Hingham, and so we thought summertime would be a good time to focus on some of the support services that we have for the Hingham Public Schools. And so today we're going to talk about transportation. I have three guests. I'll introduce them now, and then we'll have some dialogue in a minute or so. So to my immediate left is Patrick Cunningham, and Patrick is our transportation supervisor. This is his first full year, just about completed the first full year. And Patrick, you were a bus driver for us before, so how many years have you actually worked for the Hingham Public Schools?
This is 7 years.
7 years,
Yep.
Okay. And Patrick was a big bus driver or
That's
van
correct,
driver?
yep.
Big bus, okay. And next to Patrick is Bernie Owens. And Bernie, you've been with us for?
8 years.
8 years, and Bernie is a van driver, special education students, and we're going to talk a bit about special education later in this episode. And next to Bernie is Paul Mayu, and Paul drives the big bus.
Yes.
And has been with us for?
16 years.
16 years, wow, that's a record. Probably not a record in the department, but a record for doing your job, trying to go forward while all of your partners are behind you, not face to face. So it's a challenge to be a bus driver, as you will all hear. So let me give the audience a bit of information about our program. In Hingham, we contract out or lease our buses, the big buses, and we provide our own drivers. So the drivers of the buses are actually Hingham Public Schools employees. With respect to the vans, the drivers are Hingham Public Schools employees, and in fact we own our own vans and are in the process of kind of a rotation of replacing them as they are needed to make sure that they're in good order and safe for our precious cargo. The cost of our bus transportation in Hingham for the regular education part of it is about between $1.2 and $1.3 million a year. And that for the regular transportation means we have 20 big buses and a spare, or sometimes more than one spare, on the lot, which is really important to us. We have 8 vans, special ed vans, in service, but we'll talk about that a bit later. At one time in Hingham, because I often get this question, Hingham did own its own buses back, perhaps going into the early 80s. We owned our own buses. That also meant, of course, that we needed to have an on-site maintenance program, place to do the maintenance, a person contracted to do that. And so that was one of the big factors in making the decision to move to a contracted service. Typically, we lease our big buses for a period of 5 years, and in fact, we are going to renew that lease, hopefully this past school year. However, looking at the budget, we decided that we would try to defer for a year going into a new 5-year lease. So we're currently under a 1-year lease, but intend to go out to bid, budget allowing that, sometime during the year, and it will be another 5-year lease. We have to get permission from the town to enter into any sort of a lease or contract that is beyond 3 years, and we did that as part of the last town meeting. With respect to special education, that budget is about another $600,000, and that's a combination of things. That's the costs of our own drivers who drive the vans, but also some of the services for special ed need to be contracted out. We work with North River Collaborative and are able to share some routes under that program with other districts who have students in the same placements that we do. But sometimes we have to contract out separately for a route that seems to be unique to us and where there would not be any partner groups being able to go. So that's pretty much the background. We have sufficient drivers, of course, to drive all of our buses, and we often have to use some substitutes, and sometimes you get called into service, Patrick.
True.
We're fortunate that both Patrick and the prior transportation supervisor did have the licenses as well. So, moving on from that kind of basic information, you and I had communication just today about the release of the bus schedules for the coming fall. And they are going to be released on the 27th in
That's
the
correct.
paper.
They will be in the Hingham Journal, August 27th, for everybody to see. And they will be obviously on the website also that week.
That week,
Yes.
yes. And that's an important thing for people to note, because I remember last year being in my office over Labor Day and somebody called me, I was there alone, and wanted to know the schedule. And I said, well, it's in the journal. Oh, well, I don't get the journal. Well, it's on the website. Well, I don't have a computer. So we're giving everyone fair warning that you really need to plan ahead and get those schedules. If you're in any doubt between now and that weekend, they can contact the school, I'm sure, if it's someone who doesn't have a computer.
Or the office.
Or your office, yes, right. So tell us about the scheduling. You know, do you use any kind of computer software to do the scheduling, or do it all by hand? And how does that work? What do you use as a starting point?
Well, at the moment, it's all done manual. It's all done. We are looking into changing to software. There are some products we have looked into. We haven't made a final decision yet. Next year, when we do hopefully get new buses, we will make the first step by having Zonar. What Zonar is basically a GPS, a computer system built into the buses. That would be step one. And it helps you then to set your routing program on the computer and moving forward. But right now everything is manual. We go back to last year's routes, and we take last year's routes, and then we take this year's numbers to see how they
You move
correspond.
the students up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not going to work. You may have to take maybe just a stop off a bus to a different bus. In some situations, you got to take half the route and move it around. This year, due to full-day kindergarten, obviously the numbers were much higher. Again, some situations it was down to one stop, but other areas we had to move buses around.
And it wasn't just that we have full-day kindergarten, it's that we have a very large full-day kindergarten with nearly 300 students, whereas last year's kindergarten was less than 250.
That's true. I mean, and with all the moving around, it did work out. There are large numbers of students, elementary level, on the buses. But
they'll all have seats.
they all have seats. Nobody is above the limit. And like next year, we don't know what the numbers are. So definitely the need for newer buses and more buses is there.
Yes, that's a good point, because when we built the budget, the initial budget for next year, we anticipated not only a new 5-year lease, but an additional bus.
Yes.
And for financial reasons, neither of those things happened. So we're functioning with last year's buses in terms of the number for the new routes. And I think it's important, sometimes I have teachers or parents who will say, why don't you just alternate the early and late schools every year? For those of our audience who don't know, we have 2 elementary schools that start at 8:20 in the morning and 2 elementary schools that start at 10 minutes of 9. And for various reasons, some people like the idea of year to year to year, they make their work plans accordingly, that we have the same schedule. Other folks say, gee, I'd like to take a course in the afternoon, or I'd like to take my children to a different activity. Why don't you just alternate? It sounds easy enough. But of course, it isn't easy. Scheduling is a major thing, and to start fresh every year could be a complication.
I think you would cause a lot of confusion every year.
Right.
Yeah, obviously everybody would like a change, but when you start chopping and changing, everybody's going to have a different bus. Then
Right.
it's, well, I like my bus driver.
Right.
It's an ongoing battle.
Right. And I think that while most people might have a different preference than the one they're assigned, many folks say, you know what, I would have preferred the earlier school or vice versa, but I've made this work, and I've made all my other work obligations work around it, so don't change it, would be their attitude. So, of course, there are mileage guidelines and age guidelines in terms of who we have to transport and how far they're allowed to walk. And our guidelines are much more generous than what the state would allow. Nevertheless, I know that you often get concerns about the transportation and the fairness and so on. So what are some of the kinds of most frequently expressed concerns?
The two concerns that seem to come up is the time. Everybody can't get home in 5 minutes. We love that, but obviously we can't. And kids are on the bus longer than others. You know, and that's a question that's frequently asked. You know, why get we last home? And then the other, nobody wants to walk. And as you just pointed out, we are very generous with compared to state guidelines. We can't stop at every door. You have traffic backed up. I mean, that's not possible. If it's a safety issue, then we will create a bus stop. But unfortunately, we can't pick everybody up door to door. And sometimes people, you know, they want it at their house. And but we do the best we can, and unfortunately, not everybody has that opportunity.
A concern that I hear, of course, is the fact that we don't have sidewalks. And most of Hingham, really, if you think about it, we have sidewalks around main roads, but certainly in the many developments and cul-de-sacs and shorter streets and so on, there are not sidewalks. So I get that concern a lot, that we should provide transportation. And of course, providing transportation would mean additional buses and additional drivers, and there's a cost to that. So we're always tuned into the safety aspect, but we also have to pay attention to the dollars. And I guess fair to say for those who are watching, when I say our guidelines are more generous, a lot of that is because of safety, that we don't want children crossing 3A, for example. So there may be children who are less than 1.5 miles from Foster School, but we don't want them to cross a major highway. So that's the generosity is on the side of safety. So I think you've answered the next question, which was going to be about the coming school year and the fact that we didn't get the extra bus and that we are using the older buses for one more year. But is there any other impact for the coming year?
There is, unfortunately. What extent it's going to be, we don't know yet. You have an increase in numbers. We have particularly at kindergarten level. These little ones take more time. They pick it up, drop off. It's going to extend the time each route is going to take. So getting to school in the morning is going to take that little time longer. Again, a drop off. You know, these little ones, it's very important that they're dropped off safely. So it is going to add time. So not just like you said, the numbers, it's also going to be the time-wise, the length of time for the elementary level.
That's an important point, because while we have a much larger kindergarten, overall we're about the same total number of children in the elementary schools, because a very large 5th grade class moved out to go to the 6th grade. On the other hand, in the middle school, we're going to be 50 or 60 or more kids more than we are this year. So that's another challenge. So before we get into talking about special needs, I have one more question, and then we're going to take a little break, and we'll be right back after that. But the additional question really has to do, again, with the issue of routes. When parents do have a concern, certainly we want to hear about it if it's a safety concern. When we investigate those, and we do, I know you drive out to stops, I do.
Yes.
John Ferris, who's our business director, we drive out and check out mileages and look for conditions that some folks might think to be less safe, but we also consult very much with the Hingham Police Department. We're good partners with Hingham Police Department, and we have a safety officer, and he goes out to check out the site and observe traffic and all of those things. So did you want to comment anything more on resolving concerns and what we do to try to get to the bottom of issues that people would find unsafe?
As you pointed out, we do thoroughly look into it. I mean, whatever we can do within reason, every child's safety is priority.
Exactly.
And Obviously, we cannot meet every specific individual need, but if it's a safety issue, we do the best we can to get the child to and from school safely.
Good. Thanks. Well, we're going to take a break for a couple of minutes, and we'll be right back for more conversation. Welcome back, everyone. We're doing episode 9 of Superintendent Spotlight, and that has a focus on our transportation system. So just quickly reintroduce my guest, Patrick Cunningham, who's the supervisor of the program, Bernie Owen, who is a van driver, and Paul Mayu, who is a big bus driver. So I want to start with the topic of special ed. At the very beginning, I mentioned that we had 8 vans, or will have this year 8 vans in service, 2 of which now are wheelchair vans, because I know that we just got a delivery this week of our second wheelchair van. So how many children in all on a daily basis do we transport in those vans?
At the end of the year, it was 52.
52 total.
In total, yes. Mm-hmm. We had 5, 6 are wheelchairs, and then the rest are broken down to as little as pre-K.
Right. And the vans are 8 students?
It's a capacity of 8. We try keep it less than 8 throughout the school year, because it takes some time to get these kids in and out. So I would say the average would be 6 kids per vehicle throughout the
And those children are in child safety seats?
Yes, they are. Most of these kids are in what we call a 5-point harness. It's
okay.
basically a larger child seat. They're, they're safely secured in there, and it keeps the child safe at all times.
Right. And as I said, some of our children are transported to some of our out-of-district sites in a contracted van through North River Collaborative or a private contractor. It's difficult to get everybody to the same place within the same kind of hour of school start times. That seems typical. So some of our vans transport youngsters to our own preschool program. We have a preschool program for 3- and 4-year-olds with special needs, and there are some typical children who are part of that program as well. So some of our vans transport just locally to East School, and others may go out of town.
We currently serve Cardinal Cushing. That's the only mass hospital. At the moment, they're the 2 out of district that we cover at the moment.
Okay. And all the others are our
Everything's
own
the collaborative of the high school, all in district at the moment.
Right. And so, Bernie, you drive one of these vans. What is your particular route, or what was it last year? Anyway.
Well, my route last year was the wheelchair van.
Okay.
And you took children through the collaborative, and I also took children to the high school.
Okay.
So not only are they just special needs, some kids, like we have one child that's in a wheelchair that goes to the high school. So a typical day would be 6 kids in wheelchairs or walkers.
Okay, right. So what's the biggest challenge in transporting children, some of whom's disabilities are in the area of communication or behavior?
Sure. Actually, I believe getting a trusting relationship with the child itself, that seems to be a challenge, especially the younger children. And then learning how to communicate with that child. Each child may have a different way of communicating. That it may be a child that has hearing impairment, and they may just lip read, or some might have sight problems. So learning from the parents and the teachers or the caregivers as to which way they communicate. That's the biggest challenge I see.
And of course, the parents are crucial in this in terms of assisting in getting the children not only out of the house, but into the van and out of the van on return back.
Especially in the inclement weather, you know, the doors on the van, especially the wheelchair van, it's open all the time. So heating it and cooling it is difficult too. You know, so the child has to be dressed properly for that type of weather.
Okay. So, Paul, you drive the big bus and have for a number of years, and I know because I had a friend who once decided he wanted to be a big bus driver, and was a challenging, very challenging training process. So talk to us a little bit about what training you have to undergo. It's not as simple as coming and saying, I have a license, I'd like to drive your bus.
Right, right. It's a fairly skill-orientated program involving controlling the bus over a DOT skill set course, which involves a lane change to parallel parking maneuvers and an alley dock maneuver, a thorough knowledge of all the equipment from bumper to bumper on the bus, safety equipment and engine compartment. And then there's an extensive time spent behind the wheel learning how to operate the bus safely, learning how to operate all the equipment safely, and that is quite challenging because it's much more than just driving your vehicle straight down the road and taking a turn. It's a very large vehicle. It's 15 tons. It's 40 feet long. It's very high, and there's a great deal of distraction driving a big bus. And that is probably the biggest impediment, or something that you have to learn how to overcome and focus on operating the school bus and operating the school bus safely under all kinds of conditions. Sometimes it's very loud, sometimes it's very dark, and road conditions always have to be taken into account. This winter we had terrible winter and a lot of snow that did not melt for many weeks, and the roads got thinner and thinner, and you have to accommodate and change the bus stop and pickup procedure for to maximize safety. So it is quite a challenging training program that involves a number of hours, and I'm training a new driver now, and he is doing well, but it's something that you have to keep at them, you have to keep watching them, and you have to make sure that they are always focused on safety. And one of the biggest safety concerns we have, there's a number of railroad crossings in this town, and the visibility looking down the tracks is not always good. There is no train horns used in town.
That's right. That's unique to Hingham.
So you have to rely on the equipment that is on the tracks to operate properly. And in order for the equipment to operate properly, you have to take the time to stop and open the door, open the window, look and listen, and then make sure that on the other way that there is no impediments to you crossing the track safely. And you also have got to make sure that there's enough clearance on the opposite side.
Okay.
And all this while, there's just lots of noise, perhaps police or fire coming down the road, and that is probably the biggest challenge, is to focus on safety and to not let minor or major distractions affect the safe performance of your job.
Okay. And of course, our job is transporting kids,
Right.
so I'm sure that there are times when there are challenges. And Bernie has indicated some of the challenges of dealing with children that have special needs, but on the other hand, there are the positive things too. So do you have any kind of favorite story about any of the children that you transport?
Well, there was one child that I was transporting for about 4 years, and I had asked him to say bye-bye at the end of the day, and he just never would do it. So I just about gave up on it, and the day that I did not ask him to say it is the day that he said goodbye to me. It was a very heartfelt day.
That's great.
Yeah.
We like to think we have very well-behaved children in our schools, but we know that they aren't all well-behaved every day. So we do have rules. We have bus rules that are supposed to be followed and consequences, but As you're dropping off kids at schools, who is the main contact? If you had a disciplinary issue, is there somebody out at each building, or how would you convey that?
Yes, there is. Usually the assistant principal for every school, for every elementary school and the middle school. As a matter of fact, the high school also is at the bus stop and is available for a quick consultation and to discuss the particular behavioral problem or discuss with them exactly what's going on.
So it wouldn't be unusual for the principal, the assistant principal, to pop onto the bus and kind of lay down the rules?
Oh, no, not at all. As a matter of fact, I typically will invite them to do so, and it's good that the students see that I have a good rapport with these administrative people, so that they know that I'm not some outsider that they don't have to listen to.
Right, you're part of a team.
I'm part of the team.
Yeah.
Right?
And over the years, on occasion, I know we've had meetings where the assistant principals come and actually meet with you folks and discuss things that we all could be doing better. You know, Paul mentioned the safety equipment and the kinds of things that are on buses that each time you get a new bus seem to be newer and newer. And so what are some of the kinds of safety equipment that you have that folks might not know about?
I think the one I really appreciate is what we call a child checkmate. What it basically is at the end of, when you've done your run, you got to go to the end of that vehicle and clear the alarm.
To the back of the bus?
To the back of the bus. That way you have to check every seat, because these little ones are little. They could be tucked in there and you don't see
Or
them.
taking a nap.
Exactly. And it has happened at the end of the day where we have found kindergartners, first graders asleep. To me, it's a great feature because it ensures the driver goes back there and that bus is fully checked.
Good.
That to me is key. If we have issues, we have cameras. If any concern that we need to fully cover, the cameras are there.
That would be a disciplinary kind of thing that maybe is chronic and a warning didn't suffice?
Exactly.
Okay.
I mentioned earlier, next year with the new buses with the Zonar, it's endless the opportunities that gives you. If we just simply had a bus involved in an accident, within a few seconds we can send an email to parents that your bus has been in an accident, you're okay, everybody's okay, we'll be a few minutes late.
And of course, we do have radios on
That's
all of
correct.
our buses, so
Yes.
that you can communicate with the drivers and they can communicate with each other and communicate with you and get information out to the schools who could help with notification when that might be needed. So if there were an individual out there in our audience who might be interested in becoming a driver or perhaps being a substitute, how would they go about doing that, Patrick?
Well, most people seem to come without a license, so we do offer the training. You could start out as a regular 7D van. You work your way up, then Paul, we have another instructor, Jan, and we train you. It's Paul says it's extensive, it takes some time.
Right.
But it's a great challenge. But at the end of the day, to see the smile on a little kid walk off that bus and say goodbye.
Yeah, say goodbye.
You know, especially if we're at the beginning, they're nervous, their first day. And you're sometimes the first adult they meet, basically. And you make the child comfortable and they get to know you and they get familiar with you.
Right.
And it is a great feeling when that child trusts you and waves with a smile at the end of the day.
I know Paul mentioned the tough winter, and obviously we all suffered from that, and he mentioned some of the things. The road gets narrower, and the amount of snow we had meant there was nowhere to put the snow, so the turning radius gets less and less. We're fortunate to have a bus loop at all of our schools of sorts, and that wasn't something that we had years ago, to separate the bus traffic from the parent drop-off traffic, which is significant. But what were some of the other challenges of the winter? I should mention that in the winter time, we do have a practice of picking up children who would normally be walkers, or even children walking to a bus stop. If they're on a road where a bus is traveling, the bus drivers are asked to stop and pick up any child who is walking, and that's for safety and really important this year as well. And it's another one of those things about going beyond what the requirements are, but something we think it's important to do. Do you think of any other things that we haven't mentioned about the winter time? No.
I mean, basically this winter, we were put to the test.
And of course, I know you're all being polite and not saying, well, if the superintendent would call off school earlier, then we could get to the lots and we could shovel out the buses and open the doors and all of those kinds of things. And so I do understand that is something everybody wants. Certainly the parents want to know earlier too, but we do the best we can. And given the winter we had, I think we had fantastic service. We were never down. We didn't have buses that didn't start, but a lot of that is because we have the spare bus and we have people who are there early to get things ready to go. So we appreciate that. I do want to mention that we have some other uses of our big buses that folks might not be aware of. There is state law that says that we must transport children who live in Hingham and go to a private school in Hingham to the same extent. That means in terms of the distance they would be able to walk to private schools. And so we transport students to St. Paul's School, to Derby Academy, to the community nursery school. Where else? Montessori, right, thanks.
Suasquela, do we
And
mention?
Suasquela, yes. So we're required to do that by law. And that's a challenge because those children don't live in just one district as our Hingham Public School students do. They're all over town, so some of those routes can be longer as well in terms of time. We try to use our buses for things like field trips and athletic transportation. It's not always possible because with respect to the athletic transportation in particular, that is often happening for afternoon games at the same time we're using our buses for dismissal. So we do have to contract out. So there is an amount of money in the athletic budget to contract out for those additional buses that we need for those routes. So I think we've covered quite a bit. Can any of you think of something that the folks at home should know that we didn't have a chance to chat about?
We do have a number of children that have peanut allergies that are on the bus.
Oh, yes.
And we need to have all the information, and we need to be sure that if they have an EpiPen, that the EpiPen is where they say it's supposed to be, and it stays there once, so that in the event that we need to use it, that we can use it.
All right. And so those children, for the most part, have health plans, and we know about those things, and that communication needs to take place before the year begins. Unfortunately, we've not had incidents because I think we are well prepared and everybody is on the same page. So thanks for mentioning that. Is there anything else?
The only thing I would add is not everybody is aware that we ask that you be ready before your bus stop, assigned time of 5 minutes.
Especially at the beginning of the year.
Yes,
Because
and
it's hard to narrow that down.
Yes, because then you're held up at the next stop, and it's a trickle-down
cumulative.
effect. Yes, so we ask that please, you be ready at the bus stop.
I actually thought that someone would mention that. Sometimes I'm going to my office at the same time the buses are on the road, and every once in a while I'll see a bus waiting and thinking, why aren't they moving? And then I see a mom, usually a mom, it could be a mom and a dad, running down the street with a little child or running down the driveway, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, they're trying hard to get the child to school, but at the same time the bus driver is waiting for maybe a minute, even 2 minutes, that accumulates, and by the time you get to the middle school, the perfect lineup that we try to have every morning and afternoon is somewhat in disarray. So that would be another suggestion I would make of ways in which parents could help to be on time. Well, I appreciate all of you coming today. Thank you very much. I think it's good information to go out to folks, and we're proud of our transportation system. We're proud of the drivers that we have, and the fact that we contract with the drivers is really all about being sure that we have the right people as well as the right equipment. So thank you all for listening.